Hi guys, welcome to the first reading recap of 2024. I'm going to be going through all the books that I read in January. I read 6 books in January 2024, which is pretty average for me, but let's go through them and I will give you all my ratings and what I thought of them. First book that I read in January was One Dark Window. This is by Rachel Gilling. This is a duology and I loved this book. It's very like gothic, dark, romance, fantasy vibe. So if you're really into that kind of vibe, I think this will very be up your alley. I rated this 5 stars. I loved this book. I really fell in love with the world building and the magic systems and the characters, and I thought that it was quite well paced. Like, it wasn't too slow. I was kept very entertained the whole time, and I didn't really want to put it down, and that's what makes a good book for me. So 5 stars for One Dark Window. Then I read the second book in this duology, which is Two Twisted Crowns. And I also rated this book 5 stars. Like, I don't know what to say. This series was just really, really good. I've heard people rave about this series before, and it really lived up to the hype and the expectations for me. I just think, again, it was so beautifully paced. Like, I was never bored. I didn't want to put it down. I didn't feel like it was a struggle to get through. I felt like this book was really good because it followed 2 of the other characters more closely than the main 2, which I also enjoyed. I really like it when books do that, so you get to see the POVs and you get to flush out the other characters as well as your main character and female main character. So that was really great, and I thought it was a really great conclusion to the story. So 5 stars. Then I read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now, if you are on Book Talk, you will see that this book has been circulating for years. I have heard so many people rave about this book, and I just never picked it up because I am not really usually one to stray away from fantasy. I am definitely a fantasy gal. This one is obviously set in real life, so it never really kind of piqued my interest. However, I've just been seeing so many people talk about it, and I was like, you know what, just pick it up, just read it, and I did, and I loved it. Again, 5 stars. So 3rd book of the month, 5 stars again, 3 5-stars so far. I loved it. I couldn't put it down. I was so entranced by the main character. Like, she was just such an interesting, amazing character, and she was so flawed in so many ways. Both the main characters were so flawed, and I think that made them really human to read about, and it was very relatable. And I really appreciate when characters are written that way because, again, I just think it makes them more human. It makes you gravitate towards them more as a character because they are fascinatingly unperfect. It's really boring to read about perfect characters, so I really, really appreciated that. And I just felt the way that it was written was really easy to read, and it was just a great book. So this was also 5 stars. Then I read Ruthless Vows, which is the 2nd book in the Divine Rivals duology. So this is the conclusion to that story. If you watched my reading recaps from last year, I read Divine Rivals, fell in love with it, as did almost everybody else. And this is the highly anticipated sequel. And I loved this as well. I did rate this one 4 stars. I rated the first one 5, this one was 4. I did feel like the pacing was a little slow at some point. Other than that, I really, really enjoyed this book. I thought it was a really great conclusion to the story. And yeah, I would highly recommend this series, especially if you are kind of new to reading, especially if you're new to reading fantasy. I think this series is a good one to read because yes, it's fantasy, yes, it has magic, but it's also still kind of set in the real world, and it's not like intense fantasy like dragons and crazy powers and magic like that. Like, it's very subtle fantasy, if that makes sense. So I think this would be a great series to read if you are wanting to try out fantasy but are new to it. But yes, so Ruthless Vows was 4 stars. Then I read Lightlock. Now, again, this one has been going viral on TikTok since it came out, like absolutely completely viral. I've had it on my shelf for a year and I don't know why I haven't read it. And I really regret not reading it sooner because this was also 5 stars. I freaking loved this book. Like, loved. I think it's already going to be one of my favorites for the year. I fell in love with all the characters. Like, it's slow burn, enemies to lovers, all the really good, fun, juicy stuff that, that I enjoy. But I also really loved the magic systems. I loved the plot. I loved all the minor characters. And I just feel like this was a really good introduction to this series because I believe that it's going to be a multi-book series. And for a first book in a series, I was hooked from the get-go and I really didn't want to put this down. So Lightlock was 5 stars. Then the last book I read in January was Bane, which is the 2nd book in the Lightlock series. And I also love this book, and I also gave this book 5 stars too. Again, just so many like plot twists that I wasn't really expecting, and I was really loving, honestly, the love triangle kind of vibes. I'm not normally a fan of a love triangle, but in this book, I actually really liked it. And this second book has a lot of flashback scenes, and I just thought the way that the author wrote them were very well executed. It didn't get confusing, and I was really, really looking forward to those flashback scenes because I think it really tied into the main character, and it really gave you a lot of plot information that explains a lot of the things that happened in the first book. Like, a lot of the storylines were quite well explained in this second book. But yeah, this one was also 5 stars, and I'm very, very excited for the rest of the series, and I really hope it comes out soon because it was great. So that is my January reading recap. 6 books, 5 out of 6 books were 5-star books, which is very rare. They were really good books this month, and then there was one that was 4-star, still really good. But those were all the books that I read in January, and I'll see you for the February recap.